Kudroen and welcome to Dawai Kudroen. Before I move on with my interview, let me wish all our viewers a very happy New Year and happy New Year. My guest tonight is Honorable Commissioner Mr. Kezang Jamtsho from Anti-Corruption Commission. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
You're the first guest for 2013, and I'd like to extend my warmest welcome, and I really appreciate your time, sir. It's a holiday, but you made it. So, as I said earlier in our conversation, we wouldn't want to start the year on a very negative note, but the fact is that we would want to send some very strong messages to our people, to our viewers, so that things would improve somehow. This is the intention that we have behind having this interview. So thank you once again for your time. So first question, looking back, I've asked this in Dzongkha as well, but let me repeat this. Looking back, 7 years passed. Today, when you look at the achievements, how do you feel? And the way forward, how do you see it?
Let me join Dawai in wishing our viewers Happy New Year and Happy New Year. Looking back after 7 years, we have more to feel proud of it rather than feel sad about it. I feel that we have done quite well, but it doesn't mean that we become complacent. There are always room for improvement. So looking back 7 years, we are convinced that what we have done has been in the public interest, and we have tried our best, and we cannot be complacent in fighting corruption at any time. Moving forward, we are going to continue the fight against corruption resolutely, humbly, and even with passion. In 2013, we have a program which I must mention here, that we are trying to reorganize the organization in terms of our approach. Before, we had 3 different divisions: the investigation division, public education division, and the prevention division. Now we are reorganizing ourselves by sector, and the sector will deliver these 3 services. That means a sector on natural resources. They will investigate, they will deliver public education messages, and they will also do the prevention work. So we are collapsing the divisions and trying to gain synergy by creating thematic teams.
Yes.
So this we are looking forward to in 2013, and nowhere else in the world this sort of approach has been tried. So we are venturing into uncharted territories, and I hope that we will succeed.
So you have already studied the areas that are more prone to corruption.
Yes.
And you would like to segregate into
Yes.
different groups.
So we have thematic teams like procurement and construction, natural resources, financial management, HRD, to name a few.
Yes.
So our teams are working on these thematic themes.
So, but when you talk about issues like procurement, in these cases, we have found out that there are so many systemic lapses. If we correct these systemic lapses, things should be on track, is what many would feel.
Yes,
but
definitely.
why is it not happening? Don't you see a lack of political will in amending or changing this system?
Corruption experts often say this: 99% of the corrupt activities must be stopped by systems. Only 1% should come for investigation, and that agency like us must deal with it without exception for maximum deterrence. But in our case, the system improvement is not happening as we expect. For example, the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, which looks at system, the implementation is quite dismal in this case. So
Why do you think so, sir?
So maybe it's maybe the opinion differ, I think, from the government and the Anti-Corruption Commission. We feel that there are system deficiencies and they need to be improved, whereas the government thinks the system is quite okay and they don't want to do much about it. But just to cite an example, the audit report points out every year that about 600 or 700 million is embezzled. If you look into it, there are no grand plans or grand strategies to embezzle this money. It's just oversight failure. By tightening the oversight system and by plugging these loopholes, you will save about 600 million every year. But I do not know why it is not happening.
So we have, in a way, it would be safe to say that we have actually put a system in place where people could manipulate and work things to their advantage. And it's not so much to do with the individuals, because even if individuals are reflected in some corrupt practices, the question is, would one really feel guilty? That, I think, is really missing in our individuals. So keeping that in mind, something needs to be done with the system, but let me drag words out of your mouth, sir. It's a case of institutions not willing to accept change, or it's the case of individual institutions trying to be so territorial in their approach. Don't you think so, sir?
Maybe it may be true, but any change in any system, change is always resisted. Change is not accepted as they come along. So there you need extra bit of a political pushing or a political will to make the change happen. So maybe this is not happening.
That political will is missing for now.
It definitely looks to me like that, and also the people take advantage of the system and say because the system may be corrupt, and our answer is you cannot take the system to ransom and become corrupt and justify like that. That system made me corrupt. At the end of the day, it's you who is manipulating the system. And by and large, system is there, but enforcement of the system, oversight of the system, is not happening. So embezzlement is basically excess payment, table tours. Don't you think that you can stop that by having a good oversight system, by check and balance system? Don't let people do an end-to-end job. An accountant embezzles because he's made to do the whole process of transferring money or payment. There's no check and balance. But our system has that, there are different types of checks and balance, like it has to pass through the finance officer, the administrative officer, but some people circumvent that sort of a system.
So now let's get things on record. Royal Civil Service Commission is supposed to come up with so many action plans, so many programs for civil service to boost their integrity, to promote honesty within the system. Is it happening? Do you have had any sort of collaboration with Royal Civil Service Commission?
We have a program called e-learning on integrity and ethics, and we have rolled this plan through the Royal Institute of Management as the training center, Royal Civil Service Commission, and the Anti-Corruption Commission. It is an ongoing program, but we are told that in the 11th plan, the Royal Civil Service Commission is not going to do it, and we'll have to do it ourselves, which I feel is a little bit unfortunate. Such programs they must take forward, and this is very much in line with supporting the civil servant. Don't let them prone to corruption. Develop their integrity.
Have you been apprised on why they wouldn't want to do it?
I'm not really involved in this, but our people who are involved, they told me that they have no budget to carry forward this program.
Interesting, sir. Anyways, sir, I'm getting a little confused and at times getting mesmerized by looking at things that people interpret whenever there are talks about corruption, whenever there are talks about lapses in the system. Why so much of segregation between administrative lapses and corrupt practices? Because looking at things that are happening today and recently, you always tend to segregate things. It's an administrative lapse rather than a corrupt practice. For instance, there were some cases brought to Anti-Corruption Commission, like the Toa Theatre case, Bhutan Lottery case. These issues have not been taken up by Anti-Corruption Commission, saying there are some administrative lapses and may not really warrant investigation into it.
Administrative cases, we have no jurisdiction over administrative cases. We have jurisdiction over criminal cases. But after having said this, I must clarify, when we take on board the criminal cases, we cannot leave the administrative cases. We have to take them along, but the reference point is different. We refer to the relevant authority and criminal case it goes to OAJ. But if we see this case at the first instant as an administrative case, we cannot take it on board because our jurisdiction is different. The Royal Audit Authority is the competent authority to look into administrative cases. So from that point of view, there's a segregation. Otherwise, so many people ask, why do you need Royal Audit Authority as well as the Anti-Corruption Commission? Our responsibilities are different. Where they end, we begin.
Yes.
So, and also in the court of law, the standard of proof is different. For an administrative case is the standard of probability. He may have done this, but in a criminal case, the standard of proof is beyond reasonable doubt. I must prove that he had done this. So the dealing of these two different sides must be separate, and that's why it is dealt by us, the criminal cases, and the administrative cases by the Royal Audit Authority.
Yes, sir. So the concept of assuming moral responsibility is almost non-existent in our system. What do you think? Because if things are happening right under my nose,
Yes.
and if things get messed up right under my nose, shouldn't I be responsible? This is not happening.
Yes.
And because this is not happening, we have embezzlement cases every year reflected in audit report. But people are, fine with it, okay with that.
Before I come to this moral responsibility, even the administrative accountability is not there in our system. Moral responsibility is, morally you are responsible. But most often you are more than moral responsibility, you are administratively accountable for the lapses that happen under your jurisdiction. Till now, there has been no culpability on these people, but I think things are changing. You must have read the Supreme Court case where administrative accountability is fixed on certain people now. So it is changing. The scenario is changing. Before, leave aside the moral responsibility, the administrative accountability, it was not there, and we felt, ACC felt that if there is administrative, suppose I'm a head of an agency and someone has embezzled under my nose, I should be accountable for that. But our system, I cannot be accountable if I'm not involved in that crime for criminal liability, but I should be accountable administratively. But so far, such an accountability system has not come into force.
And the worst is that if that individual gets promoted or some sort of incentives for not being accountable.
It happens. And that I don't have to elaborate. People have examples.
Yes. So, do you sometimes get frustrated for having worked in the Anti-Corruption Commission? Because when I interviewed Honorable Chairperson Dr. Nitin, she said there are people saying, go case by case, tai be mare. This kind of advice, do you receive?
No, basically, maybe I'm below the chairperson and I don't receive such instructions. But sometimes frustrations are inevitable because there's no support from the system to fight corruption, which is a public menace. So in my view, we must all support the fight against corruption, because at the end of the day, our objective is same, to have a nation depending on the rule of law and good system in place so that services are delivered to the people in an efficient manner. And that is GNH to me, rather than for every service you have to pay. So, but it doesn't come because fighting corruption, you must sometimes step on people's toes. And that people in our society, they feel that I shouldn't do it. Let someone do it. So that, just as an example, sometimes even the administrative penalty that we impose on people, we get a letter saying that as per Anti-Corruption Commission's instruction, you are penalized administratively such and such. Even the ownership
is
to take, because they don't want to be seen as bad people. We are the bad people.
And at first they'll try and protect.
Yes.
If things are within their reach.
Yeah, it happens sometimes, not all the time.
It must be really difficult to motivate people in your organization, because why would I want to strive so hard and gather enemy when my colleagues would have by now shot way above me for not doing anything and for being a psycho fan.
Yeah, sometimes, yes, our people start comparing. And we have to say, we are given this mandate and comparing doesn't help at all. Of course, that is the, that doesn't really raise their spirits. But even then, what option do we have? Our people are, we have very high standard. We have to follow the code of conduct. So many things imposed on them, but in terms of getting promotion, in terms of getting benefits, we are under the civil service.
Yes. So, lack of coordination amongst relevant agencies or institutions, as I already pointed out. Let's be very honest. What do you think of this? Because the whole idea and the agenda of every institution is to have a system that is free of corruption, individuals that are free of corruption, and we have a corruption-free society. But in some cases, for some likes and dislikes, institutions would be so territorial in nature that they'll be defending their territory. It's just that one of my GMs, general managers, always used to say that we just don't mark our territory with our feces like the wild. But we are so territorial in nature, and that's why, whether it's to do with one's ego or any other factors that's coming in between, definitely there seems to be a lack of coordination among agencies. You're supposed to work together to have a clean system, but that is not happening.
Yes.
What is going wrong, sir?
I wouldn't say ego as such, but Bhutanese like to be individuals. Bhutanese don't want to work together. That is my observation. But if you look at the constitutional offices, you must be meaning that coordination among us.
Exactly, sir.
We are governed by our own set of acts, systems. But that doesn't mean that we do not coordinate, we coordinate. And another thing I must mention here is the check and balance system is so delicate that coordination is required, but at the same time, you may seem that there's no coordination, and when one check and balance institution falters, the impact is everywhere. You can see the impacts happening everywhere. So coordination, I wouldn't say there's not much coordination. There is a forum for the constitutional offices, especially like Royal Audit Authority, the Election Commission of Bhutan, the Anti-Corruption Commission. We meet on a quarterly basis. We have no fixed agenda, but we meet and discuss issues. But then we have again, then we are governed by our own laws and systems, so sometimes maybe they come in between. But I agree with you that the national objective is same. We all are there to have a fair civil service, to have a very fair and free election, to have a corruption-free country.
Then why one says yes and the other says no, and so much of disagreements, knowing that we should be having one law in place that is to be agreed by everyone in the system?
I wouldn't say, of course, the Constitution is the mother of all laws, so we are under it. But within the Constitution, there are like Royal Civil Service Act, the Anti-Corruption Act, the Election Commission Act. So we have to function under that, but it doesn't mean that we must perform in compartments and in vacuum, in vacuums. There is potential for coordination, and I think it's happening, and we hope that it will improve in the future. We shouldn't, if there's public benefit, we shouldn't be territorial. We should support each other.
So, what about young, capable individuals joining your office? I've been told that every time you float an announcement saying you would require this individuals to take up the post of so-and-so, not many turn up.
Especially the transfer from the other organizations under the government, that's not happening. We have vacant posts for a legal officer. We float in notice, and no one comes. But to get fresh graduates, there's a huge pool outside. But there we have to be very careful in terms of their background.
Yes.
in terms of their capability, because one person can spoil the whole thing if he is, if we are not able to groom him and bring him up to the standard.
Yes.
So that there is again a gestation period, and our work requires a lot of people with a lot of experience and knowledge. And but experience and knowledge doesn't come easy. So I have already said that people are not ready to join. So we have adopted the approach of recruiting people, but with thorough screening.
Yes.
So we hope that we get good people.
So one personal question. Do you fear sometimes, or do your family fear sometimes, thinking, well, what if I might be ambushed someday, somehow? Because, when people harbor some grievances, you'll never know what might happen. And such is the nature of your job.
That thought has never come to my mind till now, saying that I may be ambushed or I may be, attacked.
But sorry to remind you then, sir.
But sometimes I feel for my children. I fear for my children. Maybe, repercussions may come on them. For me, I have reached this age, it doesn't really matter so much. But we are a Buddhist country. You must analyze, and I feel that such a thing should not happen.
So, being Buddhist and that concept of compassion, does this sometimes come your way as an obstruction to get really hard on something that you need to do it?
No, that I would call misplaced compassion. If someone has done something wrong, I cannot be, of course I can be compassionate in dealing with him, but I cannot let him go by being compassionate if he has done something wrong. So, but that compassionate, being compassionate, sometimes, we have misplaced compassion. People think that he has a family to look after. He has so many people depending on him, so let him be corrupt. That, I think, is not correct. We must correct him. And we have cases where, their bosses, their superiors have said he had done small things, but because of this compassion, he was not taken to task, and now he is in bigger things. He is in bigger corrupt practices, and so sometimes it's better to correct him in early stages of being corrupt.
Yes. Yes. So finally, I think there are so many questions that we need to address, yet we would definitely look for some other opportunities or some other avenues to talk about. But for now, I think a little more about the systemic problems that we have in hand. Why do you think this would ever change? Because there are so many systemic lapses which actually not directly but somehow indirectly encourages corruption. Yeah. And if corruption is to stop at some stage, system needs to be corrected. Will that ever happen, sir? With lack of political will?
We have to keep the hope going. The system must improve, and 99% of corrupt activities or mismanagement must be stopped by the system. And I cannot say that it will not happen. That will be a very negative way of looking at things. So if Bhutan has to develop, if we have to prosper, system improvement must be there, and it must check corruption. And only few corrupt practices that will come to our notice. And we are even thinking that we should become redundant in the end, so that system is so well established that everything is screened out by the system, and Anti-Corruption Commission would become a watchdog.
But do these responsible people know that there are systemic flaws, systemic lapses, which somehow encourage corruption?
Yes. Our every investigation is followed by a system review, and we share this system review with the agencies.
And you definitely have some set of recommendations to those.
With the recommendation saying this happened because of this, and if you must plug these loopholes. So these system recommendations are there in each criminal investigation, and it's shared with because system improvement doesn't go to the court, it goes to the agency. So this is shared, and it's compulsory, because we want to improve the system. In the end, system must take care of things, not ACC investigating each and every case.
Yes. Sir, thank you so much for your time. But before we end our show, since this is the beginning of the year, sir, your message to our viewers?
I always say this, fighting corruption, we will spearhead definitely. And Anti-Corruption Commission has been given the mandate to spearhead, but all must support us. please support with all your thought, action and deed. We have to reduce corruption in Bhutan for our future generations. So there's no two ways about it. We'll let corruption prosper and suffer in terms of development. This cannot happen. Thank you.
So thank you so much for your time. With this, I will not be corrupt and I will not tolerate corruption in others. I think this is the message that we all need to keep in our minds and keep pondering time and again. With this, we come to the end of our program. Thank you so much for watching Dawai Kudroen. Until next Wednesday, where we bring in another edition of Dawai Kudroen, it's time to say good night and Tashitelila.